Welcome back to our third segment of Civil Discourse Now. I'm Mark Small. Co-host is Paul Ogden. John Tompkins, Joh Padgett are our guests here today. John's criminal defense attorney here in Indianapolis. Joe is a community activist.
And we might do their contact information.
Yes. John is at btlm.com or on Twitter at John Tompkins. And Joe's on Facebook. And before we return to a point that John was making right before we left, okay, it's St. Patrick's Day. So this Irishman's walking down the beach, and he sees a glint in the sand, and he wipes away the sand, and it's a magic bottle. And he opens the bottle, and this genie pops out. And the genie says, "I've been in there for 400 years. I've been in there forever. Because I'm so happy and so pleased, I'm going to give you 3 wishes." And the Irishman goes, "It's a hot day out here. I've been walking on the beach. The sun's been parching me. I'll take a bottle of Guinness." He gets a bottle of beer in his hand, drinks it down, fills back up, drinks it down again, fills back up, and he goes, "What's the deal with the bottle?" And the genie said, "That's a magic bottle of beer. It'll always fill back up." He goes, "Forever?" He goes, "Forever." And he goes, "I got 3 wishes?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "I'll take 2 more of these." Anyways, John, you were making a point right before we left.
Well, the definition of intoxication in the traffic code is a little more expansive. I gave a portion of it earlier, but it also goes to what you're intoxicated by, and you can be prosecuted for being under the influence of alcohol, a controlled substance, a drug, or a combination of the 3. So, to your point, the prescription medications within the traffic code and operating while intoxicated statutes can be punished. So you can have just prescriptions in your system and be prosecuted for operating while intoxicated based solely on those. But again, within the public intoxication context, there is no definition of intoxication. So who knows what it means?
You have a right to demand a test. You say, "Hey, I'm not intoxicated. Give me a test."
No.
And so they can get their evidence with the data master, but you're not allowed to acquire evidence like actual blood sample in your own defense during the time when you're right there, because that's temporal. I mean, you don't have a chance to recover that evidence later. Like
right.
Within 72 hours, it's out of your system.
And that's actually their exact theory in being able to get warrants to draw blood from people who refuse a chemical test. They say, well, we have to be allowed to do it within 3 hours so we can preserve that evidence. But there is no reciprocal right of the citizen. I'd point out there are states that have those. For instance, in California, where I tried a DUI case and was involved in the preparation, the procedure for testing there is the officer offers the first test. The subject, the person who's being arrested, then has the option of requesting a blood, breath, or urine second test. And if they exercise that option, the officer then has the opportunity to offer a third test in response to the second. And either the officer or the citizen can decline their options after the first test, but it is there.
Paul, you want to make a couple of
Well,
points.
I want to make a couple of points. I'll come back to the one I want to make with the Senate bill. But in terms of what we had a bill going through the legislature, and I will make that point right now. Senator Michael Young, believed that we shouldn't have a public intoxication offense. Unfortunately, or fortunately,
You mean offense?
Offense. There are 149 other legislators. A lot of those legislators, prosecutors, are very powerful individuals, politically powerful police officers. I think we're saying that, well, this law didn't do anything and being disparaging. It might be a first step, and he did try to do something. He got it passed, and he had a lot of people trying to stop him from getting passed. So hopefully we'll make this better. But the point I wanted to make, and this is more from the law enforcement side, is this is a tool in the toolbox that allows us to go out and deal with individuals who are causing problems. The public intoxication offense allows them to combat that type of behavior. And why are we assuming that they're going to misuse their authority?
Well,
I mean, most of our police officers are good individuals, and they won't misuse their authority. Correct?
That's true, but it's also a situation in which a human, first of all, this country was founded in part on the principle of being suspicious of people exercising power of government. Secondly, that police officer is a human being and subject to the same frailties as anybody else. So that third, when that officer is faced with a situation in which somebody's just lipping off to the officer, and you have a right to lip off in this country, and it's under the First Amendment in the Indiana Constitution, I think it's Article 1, Section 9. You have a right of free speech. Well, officers in a situation, let's say it's contentious, they're on Broad Ripple Avenue, and there are several people who are saying, well, this is wrong, you shouldn't be hassling that guy. The officer can look back and arrest him for public intox when there's no other criminal offense for which that the individual could be arrested. That's controlled, and that's not saying that the individual police officer is a mean person or bad or anything, but they can resort to something that really violates our rights and do so through a statute that's just pretextual. It's just a pretext.
I have a couple of responses to the toolbox theory. The first one, and I also want to recognize, the vast majority of police officers that I know, and I know a lot, based on what I do, are truly great public servants. They are performing a difficult job for not the best pay in the world, not bad pay, but not the best pay in the world. And they do it because they want to be public servants. The vast majority, 90%, maybe a little more than 90%. But there are officers, nobody's perfect, there is no profession and no field of endeavor that can claim everybody is altruistic and meets the highest standards of that profession. That just doesn't exist.
Yoga instructors?
Nope. And the problem with this toolbox theory is we don't pass laws in this country to give police more tools. We pass laws to regulate society. Okay? So when we're starting to say, well, we need to pass this, and second, my point before was, none of the actions in this new element are uncovered by other crimes.
And you're talking about those parts of the statute against public intoxication that criminalizes it as an offense in Indiana that were added in the last General Assembly. Not only does the person have to be in a public place or a public place
of public resort,
but the person also has to be intoxicated and either be endangering him or herself or someone else's life, disturbing the peace, or harassing another person.
Right. So let me ask you, what's endangering your life or the life of another person?
If a person had a gun out and was waving it around when they were really intoxicated.
Do you think that every police officer is going to have that high a threshold for endangering?
What about walking out in traffic? You're drunk. You're going to walk out in traffic.
Right.
Well, or just walking down the street, if somebody could fall down when they're drunk.
This new public intoxication statute, and again, that defense comes up after the arrest, after you've spent a few $1,000s on a lawyer, after you've taken days off work to show up at pre-trials in court, after you've paid for your trial. After all that, that's when that defense helps. It does not help you when the police officer is making the decision to arrest you.
Paul, there was another point you were wanting to make.
Actually, no, I made both of those, but anyway, go ahead.
Another aspect of public intoxication offenses, I mean, the statute. First of all, we were in Canada one time.
Now I remember the question I was going to have. But,
okay.
Well, you talked about part of the element of the statute is a place of public resort. I just wanted you to clarify what is not a place of public resort.
Your living room.
Okay.
Now with the Moore decision,
what if I'm over at Mark's house? Can I get drunk there? Am I in a public place?
If you stay there, you're probably okay.
What about a hotel room?
that's a place the public is welcome to come and dwell. Now, and you get into all these, you might want to look at some of the Fourth Amendment decisions about your expectation of privacy in a hotel room versus your room at home. When you're the guest at another person's house, that's another Fourth Amendment search issue if they're searching the house. And all those are going to have been examined. The most recent, this Moore case that says that a privately owned vehicle, the passenger seat of a privately owned vehicle, is a place of public resort. Traditionally, the definition had been, before Moore, a place where the public is welcome to dwell on an ongoing basis. So even though a bar is private property, the public is welcome to come in there. The lobby of my privately owned law firm, the public is welcome to come into the lobby. So even private property can have an aspect of public space. It doesn't have to be just out on the street. Now with the Moore decision, they're saying, in effect, your passenger seat is a place where the public is welcome to come and dwell, which means that when you're stopped at a stoplight, if some stranger wants to come up, pop your door open, and sit in your passenger seat, you really can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the kind of absurd application and unrealistic interpretation of a law that I don't think was considered by the court in the Moore decision. And I would add, if the passenger seat of a privately owned vehicle is a place of public resort, clearly taxi cabs and buses, limos.
Absolutely.
Also though, solicitation of prostitution cases, suddenly, officer, I couldn't help it. She was wanting to sit in a seat, and this is a public place. How could I say no to her on that? I think that one aspect of public intoxication laws, laws that criminalize public intoxication, one aspect that troubles me, really bothers me, is, and the Super Bowl was a good example. We have all these ads on TV saying, you really try Budweiser, well, try any brand of beer. All these billion dollar ad campaigns to get you to go out to a bar and have some beers, and then ironically that's criminal.
And pay the tax on that beer.
And pay the tax that pays for the infrastructure of all these people who have an interest group that is actively wanting to keep this activity illegal. And that bothers me. Now we were in Canada, and this was in Ontario province, and I was talking to the manager of the hotel and his mother sitting in the bar, and I said, they were talking about how bad crime was on the other side of the falls, and I said, it couldn't be that much different. It's only a couple hundred yards. Well, it's a border. There's no fence, and you can't kind of go over the falls to get over here. People have tried it. And I said, well, you've got crime over here. And they said, not nearly what it is over in the States side. And I said, well, how many cops are working the riverfront today? And they said, guess. And I said, I don't know, there are 50,000 people down there. And they said, that's probably accurate. And I said, I'm going to say 50 cops. I was just guessing. And they said 4. And they said, how many of them do you think are armed with firearms? And I said, okay, this is a trick question. You're going to say none, right? I said, none of them. None of them are. I said, well, what do they do about crimes like public intoxication? And they said, we have no such offense. And I said, well, what happens if somebody goes and urinates? I didn't say urinates. It urinates in somebody's yard. They said, that's conduct for which you've either got indecent exposure or damaging somebody's property. That's the offense for which they're arrested. Of course, we're also talking about a country that is preoccupied with hockey. We'll be back after this break.
History.